Ron, I am so excited to have you here with us on the Convert with Confidence Summit. Today we get to speak with you, six-time selling author, award-winning speaker, and creator of the Velocity Mindset. And I'm so curious, Ron, what you mean by velocity mindset. But first, can you tell this audience what motivates you to do the work that you do?
Well, that's a big question. So I've been doing this for about 33 years. And I started as a sales trainer, which morphed into keynote speaking and sales. I became an advisor to board of directors, and then an advisor to CEOs who are looking to increase their company sales, and then moving into leadership and working with the entire leadership team, because it's really about a sales culture in an organization. It's not just a salesperson that you have to worry about, or a sales team. But we've also done some work with some providers, individual providers, like many of your audience members. What got me into the velocity mindset is I've always talked about velocity because, my work was always how do people increase their business sooner or later and get to where they want to be. But when I was done with the presidency of the National Speakers Association in June 2014, when I gave up the gavel, I had about 9 surgeries in the next 3 years, mostly on my back. So I was down a lot in that period of time. I couldn't travel. I was on painkillers, after the surgeries. And you start taking stock of your life. And I was 57 at the time. And you look at your successes, which I've had many, but then you look at the things you didn't accomplish, which I've also had many. And you ask yourselves why. And it's some of the things that I know you personally deal with clients. The things that stopped me, the stories that I told myself, the fears and so forth. So I realized what a shame it would be if I never get to those things because of my fears or anxieties or whatever. And I had a renewed passion because I was getting tired with just sales and leadership, even though that's what I still do a lot and I do it well. I knew there was a higher calling for me than just that. And so I decided to bring the velocity mindset to the world because I figured it would be a shame if anybody wakes up after a period of time, a year, a lifetime, whatever, and then they're disappointed because they missed out on opportunities. Yes. So that's the passion that I have right now, how to bring the velocity mindset. Now, the key, Lydia, is what do people define velocity as? So when I say the word velocity, what's the first word that comes to your mind?
What comes up for me is like speed or momentum.
Yeah.
So that was my next question, is like, what does velocity have to do with like scaling or building momentum in your business? Because a lot of these, a lot of the audience watching here, they've been in business for a while and maybe they're just complacent or comfortable. Right.
Well, a lot of people do say speed when I ask that question, but if that's all we think about, that's not velocity. In fact, if that's all we think about, speed, do it faster, 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 what we're going to get is burnout. I'll give you an example. How many times have you, done your to-do list on a day and you're going fast and you're getting through all these things, and then at the end of the day, you didn't even have time to eat lunch, and you sit there exhausted and you're saying to yourself, what did I really accomplish? Even though you accomplished those tasks.
Yeah.
And so what's coming up is that, if you look at the physics definition of velocity, it's speed with direction. So if you take the word direction and maybe change that word and put the word purpose in, speed with purpose, you're going to make better decisions if you have that purpose in your mind in every waking moment. You're going to do better tasks. You're not going to waste time on tasks that don't support that purpose. So the point is, if you really want velocity, you need to understand what it is you're trying to accomplish and have that drive you, not just starting from the bottom up and doing the tasks on a daily basis. We got to be purpose-driven, not task-driven. And that's what velocity is all about.
I love that. I can think of, just yesterday, I'm like sitting here at my desk and I'm like, okay, I'm doing a lot of things. It's 11 p.m. and am I moving myself actually forward?
Right.
Am I just doing the same things every day, like seeing clients and, scheduling people and reaching out to people? Like, am I actually moving forward? And I found, actually what came to mind when you were talking is I remember some like little meaningless tasks that I used to do, but they were tasks that to help me avoid doing
Right.
things I really needed to do out of fear.
Right. And that's true. Now, I know that your members are also struggling, how to make more money, how do I ask for money and all that good stuff. So let's give a sales example, if you will, about the velocity, speed with purpose. So when the salesperson comes up to me and they're asking me for my help on a certain call that they're about to make, my first question is, what's your goal for the call? And often they say, I want to close the deal. And I say, well, how many calls do you usually do in a sales cycle? And they'll say 5. And I said, what call is this? They'll say the first one. I said, so let me see if I get this straight. It usually takes you 5 calls to close a deal, and you want to close them on the first call. And I said, all you're going to do is lose the deal then, because all you're going to do is trial close. It'll be all about you having to close the deal. And you're not even doing what you need to do to get the attention of the prospect, which is to have empathy, ask questions where they're trying to go, and align your skills to where they're going to go. And so that's why that person will lose the deal, because their tasks are not supporting the true purpose. The purpose for that call is not to close it. The purpose for that call is simply to identify them, whether or not they're a good fit for you and vice versa, and then to get an agreed path forward as to what you both need to do in order to determine if you are going to move forward. And so for your listeners, it's not about closing the deal that they need to be thinking about. They will gain velocity if they truly understand what the purpose is that they're after. And the purpose should be aligned with their prospect's purpose, meaning, what are they trying to accomplish as a result of my work with you? What are the outcomes that they want? And then how can you specifically just talk about those 2 or 3 things that they're looking for and how you're going to help them get there? That's how they'll close faster. And that's how they'll close more. And that's also how they'll make more money. Because at the end of the day, when people have fears of asking for money, you will have less of a fear asking for money when the purpose is so important to that person and to you, and they know that they can get there. Then it's no longer an issue about money, it's an issue about value.
Yeah, I love that. Like, so many things were popping up just in that last 2 minutes of everything you're saying. Because I can remember, and even now, like I'll have my subconscious to be like, okay, I got to close this person today. How many people can I close today? And the conversations were very shallow. And it was like I was going through a checklist.
So when we say how many people can I close today, that's self-focused, it's not customer focused. And so what if we just change that to how many people can I help today?
I love it. Yeah. And another way to think about it,
and I'm sorry, 1 second. And the reason why that's so important, because you're changing the paradigm. How many can I close is about you closing. That's the task you're going to do. And it's going to be self-focused. When I say how many people can I help, you're going to be doing different tasks. You're going to be asking them questions about what their issues are, where they're trying to go, and where they need help. And that's the significant difference.
Yeah. And like another question that comes up is like, well, how do you know you even want to work with them? Because I've had some like amazing sales scripts, right? And they work, but I found myself often with clients who were just not they didn't have the qualifications I was looking for. And so I think a lot of coaches and consultants and service-based providers is like they have these scripts and they work to a certain degree, but we end up frustrated with the type of clients that we're working with because we didn't reach down and really find out, right? Like what is really going on here and what's important and what they want.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things you just brought up. So number one, if you want to gain velocity, you need to be very clear who your ideal customer is or client. Why is that important? Because you need to know the areas that you really do well in and the areas you don't do well in. And you need to find those people that have those areas that you excel in. Because if you have that relationship, it's going to be the right person. You'll be doing it with velocity. They'll be appreciative. If it's the wrong person you're dealing with and trying to coach them or, do your services with, then you're going to be spending a lot more time trying to get to results because they're either resisting you or they don't have the right skill sets that you need them to have or whatever it is. So not everybody is a good prospect for you. And we all have to understand that. And instead of closing, think about how do we find the right people where it's the right fit, and then concentrate on how you're going to help them get to where they want to be. You have that conversation first. And then when they ask you, well, how much money is it going to be? Then you give them the investment in terms of what it will take for them to get to where they want to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think just getting, what I'm hearing is like just getting rid of that word close altogether.
Yeah, I mean, we have to close. I mean, in sales, yes, you got to close the deals because a lot on the other side, a lot of people are afraid to close. They're afraid to ask for the order and so forth. But I think that, well, let me ask you this question. I'm sure that when you look back at your prospects you didn't do business with and the prospects you did do business with, you can probably pick two right now in your head that came from different sides of the spectrum, right? One that you were trying to close, and you can share with the audience how that went when your mindset was just about closing. And then the other one who, for some reason, you got into a great conversation, the chemistry was there, you found out what they were trying to achieve, you share with them how you can do it. And it was just like something that happened, the conversation, like when you met someone you might be going out with and it just clicked. Maybe share that, can you see the difference for yourself in those two scenarios?
Absolutely. Like one call was more like a checklist, like here's a question here, and then question, answer, like an interview versus just a conversation and just really listening. And I think that's where, and I want to get your feedback on this as well. Like what gets in the way, what, in your own words, what gets in the way? Like why do prospects walk away? Like what's missing here?
Well, first of all, a prospect walks away. It's not necessarily bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you have to understand that not everybody is a prospect for you. It has to be the right client. So number one, stop feeling bad if someone walks away. It just wasn't meant to be. Mm-hmm. Now you could say, if you really wanted that prospect, what leaders do is when you talk about this in velocity mindset, instead of blaming somebody or something else, the first thing they do is ask themselves, what can I do differently? That's a positive thing. If a call didn't go the way you wanted to, and you want to assess what you can do differently, because every action creates reaction. And if you don't like the reaction, change the action. But you can't be afraid to lose a prospect. The moment you're afraid to lose a prospect is when you're operating out of a weakness. Mm-hmm. and then you have a cloudy view of things and you can't really make the right decisions. I was in Brazil. I was invited to give a negotiation program to a public audience. And in the break, a gentleman came up to me, and this was a few years ago. He owned a small manufacturing company. And he says, my problem is Lopez. Lopez at the time was a famous purchasing agent. He worked for General Motors, I think, I forgot. Anyway, he was ruthless on his vendors, forcing them to cut pricing. Eventually, he wound up in jail because he did some things that weren't legal. But at that time, he was an automotive parts manufacturer, small company. Lopez was his customer. He kept making him cut the price, and he cut it so low he can't go anymore. And he goes, what do I do? I said, your problem is not Lopez. He goes, what do you mean? So the problem is that you don't have anybody else to use your machines to make product for. If you had other opportunities, you wouldn't be so dependent on Lopez. And you're afraid to lose to Lopez. As long as you have that fear that you can't lose, you'll be the victim to what he does and you'll never win. You have to be willing to lose the deals. And when you lose them, it's not because you necessarily failed, it's because you uncovered that it wasn't the right deal for you or for them, and you need to move on. And by that way, you'll gain velocity because you have the purpose of what the right customers are and the kind of business you want and where you have to go. So you'll probably look for better prospects to begin with. You'll do a better job of qualifying them. And then most important, Lydia, when you close the deal and you guys are now doing the intervention, it's going to be a much better intervention for both you and the client.
Mhm. Yeah, I can think like way back when I first started my business, and I'm sure for those of you watching, maybe you're just getting started and there's that like scarcity mindset. And I remember times where like a prospect would be like, it's too expensive, or let me get back to you, only to disappear into thin air. And it was so self-defeating for me. And I couldn't look at it that way. And I'm sure a lot of people here watching can relate, because what ends up happening is we turn inside and we internalize it, right, as a failure, or I'm not good enough. And can you hear now, for those of you watching, this is not the case. Like, you're enough, you're done, right? We can always get better at,
Well,
right?
when it doesn't work, I mean, how about if you just do this? Say, next.
Yeah.
And I mean that because I say, okay, I just thank you for qualifying that you're not the right client for me. I know my numbers. I know for every prospects I speak to, out of 10, I get one client. You one of the 9 I'm not going to work with. Thanks for exposing yourself to me that way. And I can go to the next one.
Yeah.
There's a freedom in that.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And what this tells you, right, if you're watching here and you're struggling with raising your prices, you're struggling with talking about money, maybe you fear even like I used to fear following up with people who didn't pick up the phone, who booked on my calendar. And it was all because this fear of, really, I think what it came down to was like rejecting me or rejecting my product. And then of course going in and internalizing it. But I love that reframe of just, instead of going inside and internalizing it, just next.
Right.
Yes.
Now, the reason why we don't do that sometimes is for what you just said that we need to talk about, is we internalize it and we create stories. Anytime someone says something to you or does something to you, we automatically create a story as to what we think was meant by that. And it's a story that fuels you. I mean, that pushes you, motivates you to move forward. That's great. Keep using that story. But if it's a story that stops you, then it's not serving you well. Now, here's the good news about stories. Who wrote those stories, Lydia? We did, yeah. And so whoever wrote the story can rewrite it.
Yeah, rewrite it.
So once you realize that, there's a sense of power, that is a sense of freedom. Where, I just felt it right now that, your shoulders, the burden just goes off your shoulders, and you realize, wait, it's just a story. And once you allow that emotion to go away, I'll give you an example because it's in the Velocity Mindset book. When I got out of college, I wanted a sales position, and I wanted medical device sales because they made money, they had company cars and blah, blah, blah. I couldn't get a job. They all said, well, you don't have experience. I said, how are you going to get experience if you're not given the opportunity? So I had to take a job in retail for a couple of years. And then I finally got a company that was going to give me a shot. It wasn't medical sales, which is funny because now medical sales companies come to me to help me save them. So that's pretty funny. But anyway, I got a starting sales job with Royal Business Machines in 1980. It was a copier company. And it was a time of a major transformation. Some of the younger people don't laugh at what I'm about to say, but the major transformation in 1980 in copiers was they went from liquid toner that got all over your clothes to dry bond toner, like the cartridges you change in your printer. No mess, no fuss. And it printed 15 copies, crisp copies. And I said, where's the collator? Don't worry about it, being in 6 months. Duplicator, 6 months. I started going out into offices, and the first thing they say is, well, can you do what the big Xerox machine does on the 3rd floor? And I go, what does it do? Duplicate? Not yet. Collate? Not yet. Well, come back when you have that stuff. Well, after 3 months, Lydia, of having the door hit me in the butt and hurting so much, I decided, well, this ain't working. I could blame my company for not having those other things, but it's not going to help me. I don't have it. So what could I do differently? So I decided to pause. And pause is a big part of velocity. Because if all you do is being task oriented and keep going, and it's not working, you're just wasting time. But when you're realizing it's not getting to the reaction that you want, pause. Allow that negative emotion from the story you got in your mind that you're not a good salesperson like I had, I'll never sell anything in my life, to alleviate. And then I had what I called as a board meeting, me, myself, and I. We went to where you'd go in New Jersey. The only place to go is a diner. And I went and I had a meeting with myself and I said, what's the deal? I'm going in trying to sell a copy against the Xerox machine. What do they do? They compare me to Xerox. Can you compete? No. So can you have a different conversation? And I asked myself, what does a copy really do? It's part of a communication process. So have a conversation with that and see what happens. So my next call, I met an office manager and I said, would you agree with me that a copy is nothing more than a communication vehicle? She said, absolutely. I said, when it comes to that, what are your biggest challenges? And Lydia was like, all of a sudden, I was to shrink. She was in my office laying on the couch. And she goes, can we talk? And she goes, Sally and Bob on the first floor, they gotta make one copy. By the time they talk to everybody, go to the staircase, walk up to the third floor, then stand behind all the big jobs, then make the return trip and have all those conversations. It can take them 2 hours for one copy. I said, how often does that happen? She goes, try the equivalent of 2 full-time employees. I said, how would you like them back? She goes, how are you going to give them back to me? I said, simple. I'm not here to compete with that Xerox machine. It's a great machine. Keep it. I'm here to fill in the gaps. I'm here to give you back those 2 full-time employees. You shouldn't buy one of my machines. You should buy 3, one for every floor. This way, all the employees can go straight to that machine, make the 1 or 2 copies, crisp, clear copies, and you got your 2 full-time employees back. And I sold 3 copiers that day. And I started selling multiple copies. And what changed? The product didn't change. The only thing that changed was the conversation.
Yeah.
And the only one who could change it was me. So what we talk about in the velocity mindset is that, you know, the premise is, what would the world look like if everybody acted like a leader and not as a victim of circumstance? And for the first 3 months, I operated as a victim of circumstance. Poor me, my company didn't do this, they didn't have that. It's all them, not me. And only when I paused, got rid of that negative emotion and allowed myself to see it clearly and realize maybe I'm having the wrong conversation, let's change it. When I changed it, that's when I got to a different result.
Yeah.
That's the velocity mindset in action.
This wow, I can for those of you watching, can you see, are you beating a dead horse? Right? I can't even remember how long I had this one script, and I think I used it for 2 or 3 years, and it would work to a certain degree, but it was not a conversation. And what ended up happening was I realized the work I do as a hypnotist is no different than what you do and what everyone else who's out there who's trying to connect to, yes, make a sale, but also to help and to guide and to be a teacher for that person who's buying from them. And as soon as I got rid of this script, I was like, this is just a checklist. And the minute I got rid of it, the next phone call I had, boom, I had my first high ticket paying client. And this client had come out of the blue. We had never worked together. I couldn't even remember our past conversation or what her issue was. So she was basically just fresh. It had been almost a half a year since we talked, but it was like that, because I was like, why are we talking here? That was really my biggest question, is why are we talking here? What's the issue? Why did we get on the phone today? Why are we talking after 6 months? What changed? And it was that easy. And part of it was being in front of the right person. And
so when you had the script, what was your script based on? Was it questions for them, or was it you telling them how you're going to help them?
It was really just eliciting information from them.
What kind of information?
Why are you reaching out? Why reach out today?
Okay. Questions like that are what I call status-based questions. As much as we want to eliminate negative emotion from ourselves, we want to create emotion on the part of the prospect, because there's 2 parts to influence in the body, the heart and the mind. Heart is where the emotional connection is. Mind is where the logistics are. You evaluate this. Does it make sense for you? Most people go straight to the mind, but you don't even have the emotional connection yet.
Yeah.
Emotional connection is about where someone's struggling to get to, or what something that they want so bad. So when you're asking, why'd you call me today? Or, why today, blah, blah, blah. The more powerful question would be, let me ask you, if we were to work together and it was successful, describe what that success would look like to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because it's about where they want to go. And it's not about you. Everything, the status-based question, why are you doing this? Have you used anybody before? Blah, blah, blah. It's all about you because you want to get the deal and what you have to do. It's got to be about them. And when you start getting people into the mindset, and we do this, we actually talk about in the book, the velocity mindset, because it's about the hormones in the brain, the cortisol, the dopamine, and the oxytocin. The first thing, if you accept the fact that as a practitioner for what you do, and not just selling, when we talk to salespeople, you have to look at yourself as a leader. Because as a salesperson, you're leading people through a process. And as practitioners, you have to lead them through a process that give them the opportunity for you then even to lead them through your professional process to help them get to where they want to be. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so a good leader, and we're all leaders in life, a good leader knows one thing: their success comes from making the people who depend on them successful. Not about you being successful.
Yeah.
You help those people who depend on you becoming successful. You in turn will be more successful than you ever thought was possible. That's the way it goes. So if you want to create that emotional connection, don't start by, well, have you talked to a therapist before? Have you talked to a hypnotist before? Whatever. It's about where they're going. Tell me, as a result of our interaction, what do you want to create for yourself?
Yeah.
And as they get lost into that, all of a sudden they stop thinking that you're trying to sell them. So the first thing you have to do is that when they call you, okay, they already have the wall up. You're going to try and sell them. And if all you're doing is asking status-based questions or questions about yourself, and you're not even getting to where they are, that wall stays up. The cortisol is up, then fight or flight. The first thing we have to do as a leader is create a safe environment for them to want to engage with us. And the key word is engage. So how do you do that? Understand the cortisol is up, lower it. How do you lower it? By asking them where they want to go.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden their fear factor goes down because you're trying to sell them. They get lost into where they're trying to go. You ask follow-up questions to help them get there. And then, Lydia, this is the key. When you have that information, now you're empowered to talk about just the 1, 2, or 3 things of what you can do to help them get there. And that's when that conversation will be heard with power. But what most people do is they start puking. People who utter knowledge about everything, they start puking about all the things they can do. They may list 20, of which 17 don't mean anything to that customer. The cortisol goes up and you already lost them before you even asked for the order.
Yeah. And what's
I
really,
just said a mouthful for you.
yeah, but it's everything you said was so important. And I think what it all comes down to here is like, is there a connection? Is it open or is it closed?
Yeah, it's an emotional connection. Because only when there's an emotional connection to where they're trying to go and they think you can help them. And the funny thing is, if you do it right, you would not even told them one thing of what you do yet. They'll think you already told them a lot because you're just asking them where they want to go. That's the funny thing about it.
Yeah. And the key here is like really being present, right? Like if you're not present, if you're in your head, you're worried about like, oh my gosh, money, let's say, if you're worried about money. And
how can you be there for somebody?
Yeah. You're not emotionally available.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Say that again. It's important for your listeners.
You are not. If you're in your head and you're like money and do I have enough clients? Am I going to get more clients? Where am I going to get the next clients? You are not available to be on a call. And what I tell my clients is like, if there's a sense of urgency, don't do it. And I think that goes for most things, whether it comes to, hey, I'm just trying to get in better health. And I know as a hypnotist, I work with a lot of weight loss clients and they'll go into try and losing weight out of urgency. And what ends up happening is it backfires always. And the same deal with getting in front of prospects or doing like a presentation.
Yeah, so one thing you have to do before you even have the conversation is what I call is get yourself prepared. Have the grounding conversation with yourself. What's my purpose?
Yeah.
Let's say it's a prospect. I want to clarify it's the right thing for both of us. Have it in your mind. How am I going to find that out? Ask them where they're going. Flesh that out. And then have it clear that you're going to find two things. Are they the right person for both of us? And did we get a path forward established? You have that in your mind and you're grounded. You're no longer thinking about the fact you need money. You're no longer thinking about all the other stuff. You're having a better conversation and you have a better shot of closing that client.
Yeah. I love it. This has been such a powerful conversation. I know, Ron, we can go on all day, but to honor everybody's time here and those viewers watching, Ron, I know you have a free gift for this audience. Can you tell this audience about what you have available for them? I know it's a leadership assessment.
Sure. So they go to velocitymindset.com. Again, that's velocitymindset.com. First thing you'll get is a screen to put your email address. The only reason we ask for that is because every Friday we release new videos that I do on how to stay in the conversation so you keep living the velocity mindset. They're free of charge. But you also have access to a free leadership assessment. It's 5 questions, you answer it. And the good news is that after you're done, you're going to get tips and recommendations on how you can move forward in all 5 areas. So that's totally free. And then if you're so inspired, there's a link, or you can go straight to Amazon.com and buy the Velocity Mindset in any format that you want.
Love it. So click the link below, guys. Go check out the Velocity Mindset. If you feel like you've been at the same thing for years on end, it's time to, like you said, stop and pause and think about, like, how can I create that emotional connection? I guarantee if you struggle with creating emotional connections in your business, you also do in your personal life. Right. So how we behave in one place is how we behave everywhere. So
Right.
click the link below, go get his book off Amazon. I'm excited. I'm definitely going to go check it out and go get the assessment, see where you are. Like, this is a free assessment. So click the link below, go get that right now. This will only be available for the next 48 hours. And Ron, I want to thank you so much for being with us today. What a conversation.
Well, thank you for having me. And I wish each and every one of your listeners all the best, because the world needs what they do.
Yeah.
Now we just got to make sure that they can influence others to do what's important so that we can all improve the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Ron.
Thank you.